Tank Davis just kind of keeps rolling along. And a lot of these Tank Davis fights start to look somewhat similar, where, early on, an opponent of Tank has some success, but eventually Tank figures him out and then stops him, oftentimes, violently. What did you think of Tank's performance?
I think, look, there was some concern about Tank coming into this fight off of a 15-month absence. And the fact that he was fighting a undefeated guy who knew how to box. And I think you saw that in the first 4 rounds. It was like Tank had to digest a lot of information and process it. But then as soon as he started throwing his heavier blows, it definitely discouraged the interest of Martin to go in there and box the way he had been fighting in those earlier rounds. And that gave Tank the ammunition to really, get a lot closer and then start throwing and landing the heavy artillery that really, like I said, diminished Frank Martin and led to the knockout in this neutral corner where Tank spent a lot of time just hammering him.
Yeah, and whenever I see a fighter have success against Tank early, I never really get worked up about it one way or the other, because how many fights now have we seen where a Tank opponent will have those moments early on, outbox him a little bit early on, whether it's Ryan Garcia, Hector Luis Garcia. You could even argue Rolly Romero was okay early on before he got knocked out. Eventually, the result's the same. Tank lands some kind of big shot. In this case, it was two big shots. It was kind of that uppercut that did
Oh,
a lot of the damage early on, and then the left hand, or the right hand, I should say. Was it left hand or right? I forget what one, but whatever it was that put him away at the end. It kind of reminded me a little bit, watching it on tape, of the Canelo Kovalev fight. You remember Canelo wobbled Kovalev badly, put him out with, I believe it was a left hand, then finished him off with a straight right. That's just what Tank does. His ability to finish is rare amongst these lower weight class fighters. In a way, he kind of reminds me of Deontay Wilder, in that it doesn't really matter where he's positioned on the scorecards. He's just able to find a way to solve his opponent, and his power punching at 135 and below is basically unparalleled. So good win for Tank Davis on that one. And of course, now with Tank, it's always about who he's going to fight, right? Like, look, he's going to be 30 years old in November. And if there is a criticism of Tank Davis, it's that he hasn't faced what we would consider an elite opponent. He had a good win at 130 over Jose Pedraza. That probably stands as the best in-ring win of his career. He stopped Ryan Garcia last year. That was probably the most high-profile win of his career. And then he beats Frank Martin. I would put Frank as a top 10 guy at 135 pounds, but yeah, he had one win over Michel Rivera. It didn't look that great in his last time out. We wouldn't consider him elite, I don't think, at
right.
135. So now we look at the list of potential opponents. I got to tell you, Lance, like, there's never been a better time for Tank Davis to fight a, quote, top guy than right now. If he wants to stay at 135, Shakur Stevenson, we know, is going to be a free agent after this July 6th fight with Top Rank. He's going to be available to sign with whoever he wants and fight whoever he wants. I was surprised to hear Bob Arum talking about the Lomachenko-Davis fight. That seems to be something that, at least in a preliminary nature, has been discussed. And of course, if he wants to go up in weight, we've got Cruz fighting at 140, defending his title on August 3rd. We know the history between those two guys. That would be a chance for Tank to fight in a new weight class for a real title at 140. That's the title that Cruz ultimately has. What do you think of the options that Tank has right now?
Look, I think he kind of sent a pretty strong message that he considers himself a lightweight at this point. I mean, he weighed in at 133.4 pounds. He actually said, like, I am a lightweight. And he embraced the idea. I asked him, as the first question I asked him after him talking about the fight is, like, who do you want next? Is Lomachenko fine? And he said, yes, absolutely. So that's a fight. I know I can remember talking to Lomachenko about 5 years ago when he fought at the Staples Center, the former Staples Center, and he said he had his eyes on Tank Davis then. So it makes all the sense in the world with Lomachenko coming off the victory over Kambosos, the way he did it so impressively with the knockout. Let's make this fight in November. It's a slam dunk. I mean, Tank, yes, Shakur Stevenson is a possibility, but I think from Tank's standpoint, he's like, look, this guy is coming off a real stinker where he kind of basically, evaded the action. And he said everyone in this press room knows how that fight would play out with Shakur doing a lot of running, not having a lot of action. The Lomachenko fight is guaranteed action, and it's a guy at age 36, who looks very strong at this point, who wants this fight as well. So I hope that that's the fight that they can make for probably late fall would be ideal. You've got, the promoters from both sides are at least involved in initial negotiations. So let's see where it leads.
Now, as someone that's covered the game for a long time and has been Charlie Brown to boxing's Lucy in situations like this, are you buying this? Because we're still talking about Bob Arum and Al Heyman. And yeah, they've done some business in recent years. The Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder fight was a top rank PBC production. You can go back. There's been a couple of more as well. But generally speaking, these two sides do fights that are in-house. And when I heard Bob say that, it kind of made me scratch my head because, yeah, you don't have Shakur under contract after July, but if you were going to keep Shakur, wouldn't a Lomachenko fight be the nice carrot to dangle in front of him? Shakur wants to become undisputed at 135. Loma now has a title after beating up on George Kambosos. Like, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, Lance. Did it make sense to you?
You're too cynical, Chris. No, look, we all know that Bob Arum could easily be saying, like, this is a negotiating ploy to get Stevenson to fight Loma next and keep him in house. I understand that. But he also mentioned the name of Tank Davis. So I think let's follow this down the road and see where it goes. I know I'm planning to talk to Bob maybe later this week, and see, how serious he is about it. But I do believe that it's the best fight to make next for Gervonta Davis. I mean, Gervonta came off, like we said, that long layoff and looked very sharp, getting the knockout again. To put him in there against Lomachenko would be an ideal bout for all of us to see. So I can't wait to see it, and I hope it happens.
Yeah, I think it's a good fight. And look, Loma's not what he used to be, but Loma's still really good. And Loma's not going to fall into the same traps that Frank Martin did. Loma's too smart. Loma sets traps. He doesn't fall into traps. And I think if you're top ranked, maybe you can, make a fight between Shakur and Dennis Baranchyk, a guy that now has a title at 135. That's a winnable fight for Shakur. And then, after Loma against Tank and Shakur against Baranchyk, if Tank and whoever is still staying, whoever comes out of that Loma, Tank fight, it's a major fight for Shakur Stevenson. So I could see some of that at play. It's just like, whenever I've been burned too many times, and so have you. Like dealing with promoters talking about doing cross-promotional fights that will involve multiple networks. I don't know. I'm skeptical. I still think if I was a betting man, I think we see Shakur against Loma before the end of the year and Tank against Cruz, which is an in-house fight for PBC to make.